This is one of my favorite topics to talk about how crazy the childbirth conversation has become. So in 1970, using me as a reference for a hospital birth, we went into hospitals that had standards of care. So I told you, had different things done, different things you are having done. They were called assessments, monitoring procedures. In the 1980s, natural birth movement called them interventions, with the implication that they were all imposed on women and unnecessary. And back then, when I was listening to the natural birth movement of the 70s and 80s, really, I'm 50 years into this. I was tearing my hair out then, tearing it out now, because it has just caused havoc in the childbirth field. There was very little shame, blame, guilt, disappointment around birth when my generation gave birth because we were skilled, not great skills, but we were skilled. We didn't suffer. We worked around the assessments, monitoring procedures. We didn't always like them. They weren't always nice. It's a kind of weird environment, but that's the way it goes. And then as the natural birth movement evolved into the 70s and 80s, became a global movement, became coupled with the home birthers and the people that did home birth as home birth midwives, and it became quite an anti-medical movement. Then the shame, blame, guilt, disappointment, the birth plans that didn't unfold the way women wanted, it's just skyrocketed. Honestly, skyrocketed. And my generation, when we produced multiple millions of women and men who had skills, so that labor and delivery nurses and obstetricians saw 8 out of 10 women and men using some form of skills. Once skills were taken away, and the childbirth classes in the 80s focused on information and the pros and cons and birth plans, very few skills were taught. And now maybe doctors and midwives and labor and delivery nurses, maybe they see 1 in 10 skilled women, maybe not that in fathers, maybe really 1 in 20. They just don't, people are just birthing. And no wonder the cesarean rate's so high. No wonder so many women are using epidurals. Really, there's nothing wrong with using an epidural. There's nothing wrong with having a cesarean. But we as society, if we don't see giving birth as an activity that we should have skills for, if we don't elevate this infrequent, one-off, can't be repeated, lifetime transforming, memory loading activity, if we do not elevate that to something we should be skilled for, then expect what we have. And if we keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, that is the definition of insanity. We are not going to change childbirth until it becomes natural and normal that you self-learn skills in pregnancy and use them in your birth for no other purpose than to feel that you have some control. And control is what all of us like to feel. So I want to talk to you about the interventions. They didn't confuse me at all. They were assessments, monitoring procedures. We didn't always like them. Sometimes we were delighted that they were there because they reduced the risks. So when they became called interventions, then I started to just ask everybody, what's an intervention? So a few years ago in New Zealand, I and a midwife in New Zealand taught strengthening the partnership workshops. Now, I'm not longer presently living in New Zealand. I've moved, and they were a very frustrating profession to deal with because they, like the natural birth movement, just believe that pregnancy and childbirth are normal life events and that everybody should have a home birth, and it's a nothing burger. Just, women birth by the rice paddies. Women can just birth by the rice paddies. So they took and twisted that word normal into easy and safe. And instead of being realistic about it, which is anything that might happen, could happen. And the medical assessments and monitoring procedures, whether we like them or not, are there in a modern world to try to identify and reduce risks. Good or bad, right or wrong, but it's us as consumers that want that. We do not want childbirth to go back to birthing in the villages when the rest of our life is very modern. Really, women in traditional communities would like running water, they'd like a flush toilet, they'd like refrigeration, they'd like electricity, they'd like immunizations, they'd like antibiotics, and they would love to have medical care around childbirth and pregnancy, because it is normal that there are risks, and it's normal that women suffer. So when I and this other midwife, and I'm not a midwife, so I shouldn't say other midwife or you'll confuse that I am. I'm not a childbirth educator. I'm the director of our New Zealand NGO. So this midwife collected statistics about birthing better families, and we taught strengthening the partnership workshops, because midwifery has a midwifery-led model of care based on a partnership. And it's based on the slogan, pregnancy and childbirth are normal life events that rarely require medical care. That's fine. So why do midwives feel they need to go to school for 4 years? That doesn't make sense. Why are they giving women 24/7 care? That doesn't make sense. If it's a normal life event, women should just cruise through pregnancy, whatever, and people who attend birth should just attend these normal things. So midwives go to school just in case. The same way obstetricians go to school just in case. And they do assessments, monitoring, and procedures. But funny, when midwives do them, they're not seen as interventions, which is one of those crazinesses in the conversation. So in the midwifery partnership in New Zealand, midwives respect women's choices and want to know what women expect of them. They don't expect women to be skilled. They don't expect fathers to be good birth coaches. They just want women to make choices, and those are marked down in the notes. So we want to strengthen the partnership. We want them to say to their clients, we respect your choices, and we want every birth professional to do this, or doula to do this, or childbirth educator to do this. You're pregnant. You have the right to have choices, or you may not have choices. You may lack them, and the choices may change, but it's an activity you're going to do. So here's a handout of all the skills-based methods available. Here's where you can get them. You can go to classes. You can go to the library. They're online. And self-learn skills from hopefully 24 weeks onward. Practice the skills until you feel you got them, and then use the skills where you work through your baby's birth journey, whether there are assessments, monitoring, procedures or not. And if you have a one-on-one birth professional, they should mark in your notes from 24 weeks on, and every time you see them, what skill you've learned. And then if people are with you and you have skills, you want to tell your birth professionals. If we look like we're coping well and working well together, for goodness sakes, praise us and compliment us. And if we look like we're feeling overwhelmed, then look at our notes, or here's a skills-based birth plan that we've made that tells you what skills we're using, and tell us to use them, because this is our baby's birth and we don't want to waste a moment of that time being overwhelmed. So when the words assessments, monitoring, procedures became interventions, and we taught these classes, I would say to the midwives in New Zealand, and I could say this to any midwife, right, really, what's your goal? What's the goal of your profession? And mostly it would be to have a safe, healthy mother and baby. That's true. Besides that, what is it? More natural births. Okay, so what's preventing that? Interventions. So let's list interventions. And there's going to be a handout in this lesson, and I'm going to just tell you some of them. So I'm going to bore the crap out of you about this. Vaginal exams, artificial ruptures of membranes, doctors not allowing the birth plan, not following the birth plan, women who are afraid, induction of labor, IV fluids, pharmaceuticals, handling or over-touching, directing women, cesareans, episiotomies, lack of motion, hospitals, cervical sweeps, forceps, ventouse, beds, scalp electrodes. I'm not halfway through. So when we are telling women, when we're telling each other, women to women, I want a natural birth, we are telling each other we have to avoid a long list of things to achieve that. Do you understand why? The disappointment, shame, blame, guilt, anger, frustration is rampant in the childbirth conversation. Why should anything, any assessment, any monitoring, any procedure stop you from using skills? No professional will stop you from using skills and looking like you're coping, managing, working through, dealing with, handling, staying on top of, and feeling in control. They love it. They want more of you. So when you're thinking, oh my God, interventions, then really, that's that list. And I'll put it up there as a PDF so that you can sit there and tear your hair out. Because do you know, when you're talking about birth stories that last a lifetime, and I've heard tens and thousands of them, when I hear women say to me, I planned a home birth, And then I had to go to the hospital, so I didn't have one. That just makes me sad. Or, even more picky, I planned a home birth, but I had to be induced. So I didn't, I planned a natural birth, but I had to be induced. So I didn't get my natural birth. What are we doing to each other as women? We have to stop it. Stop it. And I am just 50 years of rage at this point. I am that cranky old lady because your birth is important to you. You deserve to have the best birth. And the best birth isn't going to come from what they do or don't do, or even from where you birth, or who's present, or your beliefs around birth. The best birth you're going to have is when you birth your baby with skills. That's as simple as that. And those skills have to be adaptable, adjustable, and sustainable to carry you through all of the internal sensations you feel and all of the external things that happen to or around you. You have to choose to use skills, even if you hate every single second, even if you think everybody's an asshole around you. You have to use skills to birth your baby better. So if you have assessments and monitoring procedures, think of how much gentler that words are than saying, I had interventions. For goodness sakes, we have to stop this. So there's my rant for today. You guys get it all. See you later.